Namaste. A very warm welcome to all the participants in today's webinar. A special welcome to speaker Dr. Sujata for making the time to be with us here today. Before we introduce our speaker and hand over to Sujata ji, a little information for those who were not there earlier and have joined us today. Rtambhara Wellness is a collective of like-minded individuals that look at wellness in a holistic way, not just the body, but the mind as well, and all through the practice of knowledge and wisdom that comes from our ancient Indian scriptures and heritage. We conduct corporate programs and retreats for wellness that looks at personal transformation. The details are available on our website, rtambharawellness.com. If you would like to be a part of our community, please post your contact details, cell number, email ID, and we will add you to our groups. I may now request our Chief of Faculty, Mrs. Beena Mirchandani, to introduce our speaker for today.
We are actually very privileged to have Dr. Sujata with us. Dr. Sujata Kelkar Shetty is a US-trained biological scientist with publications in peer-reviewed journals. She did her postdoctoral training from the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development, National Institute of Health, Bethesda, MD, while at the National Institute of Health. She was curious about the interaction between the mind and the body and studied the mechanisms of how mental stress negatively impacts our physical health. Dr. Shetty has been focused on researching and writing on preventive health for the last decade. She wrote a regular preventive health column for Mint, the leading business newspaper of India, for many years. Her writing is unique in its emphasis on cutting-edge medical research and age-old Ayurvedic practices. Her book, 99 Not Out, Your Guide to a Long and Healthy Life, was published by Penguin Random House in May 2019. The book received many excellent reviews in Indian dailies and magazines. Dr. Shetty is an ICF Certified Life Coach. She also has a bachelor's degree in genetics from University of Wisconsin Madison and a PhD in toxicology from the University of Kentucky-Lexington. In today's session, we'll have a talk for about 45-50 minutes, followed by a Q&A. Feel free to post your questions on the chat function, and Dr. Sujata will answer your questions after the talk. So let's get on with today's session and know more about the topic today, honoring your body and mind. Over to you, Dr. Sujata.
Thank you, Binaji. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Rtambhara. I'm excited to do this session with all of you. Please do keep your questions ready at the end of the session. I'd be happy to answer them. And if I can't for some reason, I'm happy to send you a message later via email. But it's great if you are engaged in thinking about honoring your mind and body, because it's the only one we have, right? So without further ado, I'm going to share screen now. I'm going to run this like a presentation. I'll sort of pop in and out through the talk. But the idea is that I just cover everything through a series of slides. Please stay focused and we'll get going. All right. So today's talk is about honoring your mind and body, right? And another way of thinking about it is that it's about building the resilience of your mind and body. Now, why is that important? It's important because many of us are feeling very stressed, right? Stress has become a very common verb in my lifetime. And if I were to talk to people who lived on Earth 2 generations ago, it wasn't a word that they used. So why is it that we are so stressed? Well, the reason for that is that the world is moving at a logarithmic pace. Things are changing incredibly fast. And what do I mean by that? I'm talking about the technological innovations that we are doing, right? The changes that we are making. And they're all good changes, at least many of them are good changes. They've made our lives more convenient. There have been medical breakthroughs that have saved thousands and millions of lives, like the vaccine technology, for example. The digital age that we have entered, AI, all of these things have potential to really transform our world for the better. But the issue as far as our brain is concerned is that it cannot move at the pace of this technology. So our brain is evolving at a linear pace, And the slope of the curve, if you'll notice, is very shallow. So what does that mean? It means that our brains are cognitively and emotionally in a state of overload. Our brains are in a state of overwhelm. And this isn't about just, it isn't about just the people who might be suffering from mental disorders. This is everybody. Everybody is dealing with this state of overwhelm. And to give you an example of how things have changed and how rapidly those things have changed, when you look at the photograph on the left, you've got an image of what a computer looked like in the 1960s. Exactly the kind of computer that, in fact, my father used when he did his PhD in economics at Berkeley. And this computer was the size of a room, and took the space of a room, and it had a working memory of 5 megabytes. Today, the computer that we all hold in our hands, that is our phones, has several hundred gigabytes of working memory. So we're talking about an extraordinary pace, right? That technology is moving. And what that means for our brains is a state of stress. Now, stress at a brain level does the following, right? It keeps us in a fight or flight state. It keeps the amygdala in charge, which is the stress center of the brain. And the amygdala being in charge means that our prefrontal cortex isn't in charge. And while we can, talk about this in depth, and that's what we do in the resilience program that I teach, but today, the important thing to understand is that the stress center hijacks our capacity for high-order thinking, creative thinking, problem solving, kindness and compassion. And you'll notice, right? It's hard to be kind and compassionate when you're stressed. When we're stressed, we become impatient. We take instinctive decisions. We are not really thinking through things. And that's exactly what happens because the amygdala is in charge. And in chronically stressed people, when people are going through high levels of stress, not all of us now, yes, we're all under some degree of stress, but I'm talking about really high states of stress that people go through, their actual brain changes. So the prefrontal cortex actually shrinks in these people, and the amygdala hypertrophies. So the point is that while our brains are plastic, as they can change with the experiences that we have, over time, if we do not reduce the levels of stress that our brain experiences, and by that I mean manage the stress that our brain experiences effectively, this can happen. And this is not necessarily reversible. We don't know if it is, we hope it is, but it's kind of unlikely if you're morphologically changing the way your brain is. Moving forward, so what is it that all of these people have in common? We've got Mahatma Gandhi, Thomas Edison, Leela Seth, Nelson Mandela, Mary Kom. What do you think is the one thing all of these people have in common? This is an interactive session. Please, share your thoughts in the chat box, and I'll look at them. You can also raise your hand, whatever works for you.
Is it determination?
Absolutely. They all share determination. What else?
Resilience, determination.
Yes, exactly, right? So there was resilience. And for some reason, when I click the chat box, I'm not able to get the drop down. Specific goals, passion, yes, absolutely. All of these things is something that they've all had, right? The one word that we're looking for the sake of this session is resilience. They were all remarkably resilient. And what is resilience? Resilience is the ability to bounce back in the face of adversity. Resilience is the ability to keep growing, right? To keep moving forward, despite what our mood tells us, what our mood does not dictate our actions. That's resilience. And it's a very, very important quality to inculcate in ourselves. And research shows us that we can actually build this muscle. So, while I don't see myself turning into Mahatma Gandhi, I know that I can become more resilient, right? I don't have to be as able as Mary Kom in handling handling myself in a boxing ring, but I know that I can become more resilient. And that if it's true for me, it's true for all of you. So that's the good news about this, right? All of these people had that special quality, they inculcated that special quality, and that is why they were able to achieve as much and lead a very, very, very fulfilling life. So it's not just about achievement and productivity, it's about leading a life that has fulfilled you when you look back at it. And that these people definitely achieved. We can't really move forward without my sharing this really powerful quote from the Gita. It's from chapter 6, shloka 6, and it tells us about the importance of working with our minds and making it our best friend, right? So Krishna tells Arjuna, for him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his very mind will be the greatest enemy. So resilience is about that. Resilience is about supporting the brain in its vulnerability, which in turn means conquering the mind. So it's not about judging ourselves for the way that we think or our frailties. It's about recognizing that that is inherent to the human condition, working with it, supporting it, and overcoming it. In other words, we can help our brains become more resilient. So if stress puts us on a downward spiral, if stress makes us more susceptible to lifestyle disease, which it does, by the way, stress is a risk factor for heart disease and diabetes and hypertension and depression and anxiety. But resilience can put us on an upward spiral. Resilience can support us in a way that makes us able to handle life's challenges and enjoy riding the waves of life rather than being overwhelmed by them. So moving forward, there are 3 F's that our brain routinely struggles with. Can you share with me what you think they are? Please share with me what you think they are.
Could you repeat the question, Sujata ji?
Sure. Our brain routinely struggles with 3 things. And those 3 things all start with the letter F. Can you guess?
Fear.
Yes, that's right.
Future.
Yes,
Future.
Focus is something that Akshay said, and that's right. Yes,
Freedom.
Fear of the future or concerns about the future. Yes.
Freedom.
So it's fear, focus, and fatigue. And we're going to look at each of these in turn. I congratulate all of you because none of you were wrong. And the idea is to look at all of these 3 because we know research shows us that our brains struggle with the 3. So the first one that I want to address is focus. Our brain isn't as focused as we think it is. It's really important for us to get this because we go through most of our day with our brains in the wandering mode. What does that mean? Well, the thing is, it's like you have all these open files, right, in your mind. And the moment you're doing a task that is mundane, that you're already an expert at, or you're bored, then your mind ends up going to one of those open files. And what are those open files? It could be something about work. It could be your finances. It could be your children. It could be an aspect about your marriage. It could be the world affairs. And God knows that there's enough to worry about in that context, the economy as well, right? Parents, aging parents, our own health. The list is really quite endless, right? And that is what the wandering mode is about. Moving from one subject to another, ruminating, worrying, all of that happens in the wandering mode. When we're in the focus mode, it's as the word suggests. We are focused. We're focused on the task at hand. So when does that actually happen? Right? Through the day, unless we choose otherwise, unless we make a distinct effort to focus while shutting out other distractions, we are in a seesaw mode where we're switching between focused and default through the day. And it's quite exhausting to do that. But more on that later. To give you an example of how our attention capacity is used, when we're learning to drive, and this is something I think everybody on the audience has had to do at some point in time or the other, we use 80% of our attention capacity. Why is that? That's because it's a skill that we have to learn, right? Our mind and body are fully attending to what has to be done, to the task in front of us. When we have mastered driving, attention capacity used drops to 20%. So suddenly we have gone from using most of our attention to using minimal of it. And that's how the brain works. The moment we master something, our minds can wander. So as adults who have mastered many skills, you can imagine how much brain wandering there is happening, right? For all of us. To drive home this point further, please share with me what you think is the percentage of the time that dentists will admit in a survey that their mind wanders when they are performing a procedure. What percentage of the time do you think that a dentist's mind wanders? And this is based on research that Dr. Sood has done. Dr. Sood is somebody who taught me the resilience modules. And that's what I'm sharing with you today. 0, 10, okay. 30%, all right. We're getting warmer now. But we're not there yet. We need to go higher. 70%. Yes.
80%?
It's actually 70%. 70% of the time, dentists' minds are wandering when they are performing a procedure on us. Because they know it. They know what they're doing. So the brain now decides to look at other things, think of other things.
Incidentally, we have a very famous dentist in our audience today, Dr. Jayashree Hegde. Also.
Okay.
Dr. Hegde, would you like to say something on this? It's an interactive session, if you're there.
I think it's only 10%.
Fair enough. So the point here then is that the attention capacity is used maximally when one is learning a task. But the moment one has learned the task, then the attention capacity drops. And it's a very natural thing to happen. So when we're driving as adults, we use 20%. When we eat, 20%. Brushing our teeth is even less. And when we're speaking to our significant others, it drops even more. So, and before we, struggle with that, right? It's just how the brain is, unless we're intentional. So the key here is intentionality. And Dr. Hegde is clearly one of those dentists who is intentional. And the moment you're intentional, your attention will go back to your task at hand. But the point here is that if you're not intentional, this is what happens to our attention. So what is our brain drawn to naturally? Our brain is drawn to novel experiences. I'll give you an example. One of my childhood dreams was to go to Tanzania on a safari, right? And last year, after a couple of years of not traveling anywhere, we took our whole family there. And it was an amazing experience. I remember every single safari I went to, every single animal I saw, the beautiful sunsets, even the smell of the grass, the Serengeti, I remember it, right? You asked me what I ate for lunch yesterday, I don't remember. But I remember that because it was a novel experience. It was a pleasurable experience. It was a meaningful experience, right? And the same can hold true about our work. If we find our work interesting and meaningful, then we're likely to be engaged in it. We're likely to have our brains focused on it. If we don't find our work interesting and meaningful, then it becomes very hard, if not impossible, to do so. So what's the key takeaway about focus then? Projects that engage your brain in the focused mode are ones that you find interesting, that mean something to you, right? And people who will engage your brain's focused mode are those that you find fascinating in terms of being able to share fascinating stories with you, are resourceful, the people that make you feel worthy, those are the kind of people that engage your brain in the focus mode. The second brain vulnerability is that of fatigue. I have another question for you. How long do you think it takes for your brain to tire when you're doing something interesting?
Not much.
Doesn't tire. So.
I meant in terms of minutes. So in hours, are we talking about 1 hour, 2 hours, 30 minutes, 5 hours? Never, somebody said. And I definitely want your brain, whoever said that.
Can a parallel example to this be like watching an interesting movie? If that's passive, is that an example? And if it's interesting, one doesn't get tired for 3 hours.
True, but that's not what we're talking about here. This is when you're actively engaging in something. So it could be like reading a book or doing some work on the computer or doing maybe some gardening. But essentially, mind work is what we're talking about here, more than physical labor. It's mind work that we're doing, and office jobs, white collar work that most of us are engaged in. And somebody said 20 minutes, somebody said 30 minutes. So yeah.
45 minutes.
Right, exactly, right? So I think the maximal is an hour. An hour is an absolute signpost. It gets your brain is definitely fatigued at an hour if you find something interesting. If you find something boring, on the other hand, it doesn't even take 5 minutes for your brain to be fatigued. So, before we judge our children on their level of concentration in their classes, if the children aren't enjoying what they're learning, it's very difficult for them to pay attention. But moving back from that, the point here is that the brain fatigues very quickly. And we don't realize that the brain is fatigued because unlike, say, going on a long hike and our legs hurting, the brain has no pain receptors, right? So the brain doesn't hurt when you are when you're fatigued. How do you know you're fatigued? When you need another cup of tea or a coffee, or you find a drop in productivity or creativity, or you feel irritable. These are all signs that your brain is tired, but there are no other obvious signs of brain fatigue. There's research that shows us that when it comes to accuracy and reaction time, right, after 60 minutes things start to look not so great. The same is true about performance, general performance. Fatigue goes up, engagement goes down. So really, what are all of these studies telling us? They're telling us that 1 hour and that's it. You need to take a break. Now, what is a break? Break is not scrolling through social media. Break is not watching TV. It can be for some of us, but it needs to be a short. It needs to be a short break that either means your brain rests, which means moving your body. When you move your body, your brain rests. Exercise is a great way to rest your brain. Obviously, you cannot do large amounts of exercise every hour when you're working. But the idea is to understand that what is rest for your brain is uplifting emotions. That's restful for your brain. Exercise is restful for your brain. Meditation is restful for your brain. Spending time with loved ones is restful for your brain. Spending time with your pets, the animals that you are connected with, young people, things that motivate you, right? These are the things that give your brain a chance to rest. Watching an interesting program is something that you might find restful when you come back home after a long day's work. But even when you've put in those hours, it's important to physically get up every hour, move your body, because being in a sitting position isn't great for your mind and body, and then engaging in something that allows you to just take a break from whatever it is that you're doing. And a gratitude practice is one such wonderful practice that we're going to talk about today. But there are many more things that you can do and you can be creative with. It can just mean taking a quick walk, right, around wherever you are, whether you work from home or your office. It doesn't have to be more than a couple of minutes, but it's important that you do that. The third that we wanted to talk about today is fear. Why fear? Your brain is designed to first and foremost protect you, right? It's designed to look for threats. That is its primary function. And when we talk about threats, threats can be physical, threats can be emotional, threats can be financial, threats can be social. So the brain is scanning for threats while we're performing other tasks, because finally it's created to protect you. And therefore, fear is a natural byproduct. But the fear that we experience in life isn't always rational, right? When you look at the screen, you immediately notice a spider. And of course, a spider is rather prominent on the screen, so it'll be hard for you not to notice it. The point that we're making with this slide is that fear is something that is natural to us. Irrational fear is natural to us, and we are prone to it, right? So when we look at spiders, for many of us, there is an irrational fear, though spiders hardly kill people. But when we look at donuts, which are killing thousands of people, the category of food that they symbolize, the fried, trans fat added food that they symbolize, is really destructive for our bodies and minds. And yet this is not something that scares us. When I see a plate of donuts, I don't feel like running a mile as fast as I can. I might even be attracted to it, right? Depending upon my taste. So it's important to recognize that fears can be rational and irrational, and often we do have irrational fears. Now, rational fears are the fears that exist, whether they're in our present, our past, or our future, right? Rational, real fears. The pandemic was a rational fear. Contracting the virus, our parents contracting the virus, our children contracting the virus, the employees contracting the virus. These are all very real fears. The Ukraine war and its impact on the global economy, again, a rational concern. So there are rational concerns. However, in our minds, we are overwhelmed with hurts and regrets from the past and concerns and fears about the future that aren't necessarily rational, right? And that is what our minds get preoccupied with when our mind is in the default mode. So what is the key then? The key is to find ways of engaging as much as we can in the focused mode as possible, finding a way to bring our attention to the focused mode as possible. And this, today's session isn't really going to allow me to cover all the tools and techniques that we teach in our resilience modules, but it's definitely something that we work on in the resilience workshops that I do. So going back to the point about these hurts and regrets and fears about the future, is that when we have that kernel of negative fear, right? The kernel of fear or the kernel of negative memory, we end up thinking about it. We can end up thinking about it, and then we end up avoiding a situation that will that has created that fear. Our brain is very good at remembering anything that raises our heart rate when we're not exercising, right? So our brain is exquisitely tuned to recognizing when we are scared, because it doesn't want to repeat that situation. If possible, it wants to protect us, it wants to preserve us. And some of us are more prone to this attention black hole than others. And there's no point in judging those of us who ruminate more, who worry more. It's just genetic, right? So there's a genetic predisposition to worrying. Some of us are worriers, some of us are warriors. And while most of us are a combination of the two, the idea is to understand that there is something called a natural predisposition. And therefore, the worriers also tend to be the ones who are more prone to anxiety, more prone to depression, and other mental disorders. Now, how is it that we can help our brains then? What is it that we can do? One of the most powerful ways of supporting our brain's resilience, supporting our mind's resilience in turn, is a practice of gratitude. And while it's not something that is meant to only be practiced in the morning, I'm going to share with you a gratitude practice that I encourage you to try in the morning. Why? Because most often heart attacks happen in the morning. And that's because we wake up worrying, right? Some of us do, thinking about all the things that we have to do, all the things that have to be problem solved, so to speak. And getting into this practice and making it a habit will really help you wake up with a positive emotion, with a positive mindset, ready to start the day in a way that works for your mind and body works to honor both your mind and body, right? So are you willing to give 2 minutes of your time first thing in the morning? Because that's all this takes. It takes 2 minutes of your time, right? And I'm going to walk you through it right away. So why don't you all sort of sit back comfortably and just listen to what I have to say, and then we'll take it from there. But in a nutshell, before we begin, I want you to know that it's essentially about remembering your multi-billion-dollar net worth. What am I talking about? The 5 most important people in your life, right? It's about thanking them, and it's about thanking them in your mind. So please close your eyes, just get comfortable, and we'll begin. Imagine that you're waking up in the morning. Try to recall the color of the floor where you woke up. Now think about the first person in your life who matters a lot to you. Recall that person's smiling face. And then send that person your silent gratitude for being in your life. Now think of a second person who matters a lot to you. Go back to the first memory of this person, the first time you saw him or her. Then send your silent gratitude. Now the third person. Look at the eyes of this person. Notice the color of their eyes. Then send your silent gratitude. Go back in time and look at yourself when you were an 8-year-old or a happy moment in your childhood. Recall your hairstyle at that time. Now send a warm hello to your happy, innocent self. Think of someone who has passed away who you love deeply. Give that person a virtual hug. Then send a silent gratitude to that person. When you're ready, you can open your eyes. I hope you have a lovely evening. So the idea here is to engage our gratitude muscle, right? Grateful people are resilient people. Grateful people have a resilient brain. There's no question about it. And it's not only about being grateful in the morning, it's also being grateful for the little things, eventually, even the adversity in our lives. If we can do that, then we've really built our gratitude muscle. And it's supportive to us. right? It really does support us. It uplifts our emotion. It gives us energy. And it's very, very powerful. So what are some of the salient points thus far? The brain naturally lives in a seesaw state where the default wandering mode dominates unless we take charge. The brain fatigues quite quickly, and uplifting moments help to recharge the brain. Thoughts of gratitude are such a moment. So you can be grateful through the day, and you will find that the more you build your gratitude muscle, you'll find that you'll be a happier person through the day, right? Why? Because gratitude helps you to reframe your challenges. It is energizing, and it is building a more resilient brain. Now moving on to honoring our body. And there's much more that I could have shared with you about honoring your mind, but given the amount of time we have, I chose to focus on the principle of gratitude, on the habit of gratitude. What does it mean to honor our body? Well, it's about recognizing that this is the only body we're going to get. It's about also noticing, and this is for all of us who are avid exercisers, that it's not about punishing ourselves, right? It's about doing what works for us. Sometimes we can push ourselves, challenge ourselves with exercise, but some of us, on other times, it's just important to move our bodies. The key is to move our bodies. Our bodies are in a dynamic state on the inside. Our lungs are contracting and expanding. Our hearts are pumping. Blood is coursing through our veins, lymph through our lymphatic system. Our bodies are in movement inside. They were also supposed to be in movement outside. And one of the reasons we're seeing so many illnesses today is precisely because we have forgotten that. But we can be reminded. If we think of ourselves as children, we know that it was natural to move our bodies, and it's just a question of remembering that and going back to that. According to the WHO, what do you think is one of the top 10 leading causes of death? This is just to drive home the point we just made. So I've already answered that for you. Okay, heart attacks, heart disease, strokes, fear. What else? Diabetes, stress. Okay, so the top 10 leading causes of death is being sedentary, right? Because all of the diseases that you mentioned, the risk for those diseases is being sedentary. Please understand that most lifestyle diseases, for most of us, are preventable. It's really important that we get this. We don't all have to get diabetes and heart disease and depression and hypertension. We don't. The majority of us are, unless we change our ways. It's very important to recognize that nutrition, sleep, and exercise can play a profound role in preventing all of these illnesses. Moving forward. So even when we're seated, right, sometimes we can't get up. We're in the car, or we're in the middle of work, and somehow, getting ourselves up is impossible. Even then, movement is possible, right? So a simple exercise is the seated spinal twist. So if you're in a chair right now, all that means is basically moving to each side, the right and the left, while breathing out. So you take a deep breath in, and as you breathe out, you twist to your right, breathe in and breathe out, and you twist to your left. Spinal health is very important for your mind and body health, as you can imagine, because the spine connects your brain to your body. And therefore, posture is also very, very important. It's something to really keep close eye on, make sure that your brain, your brain is well supported by your body. In other words, the head is well supported by the body, and the body is indeed in a proper position when you're sitting, right? Your spine should be in a natural state of alignment. Another simple exercise when you're seated is to just put your arms behind you and to open your chest out, right? And this is to release the tension that tends to sit in your neck and in your chest. It opens your chest out, and as you open your chest out, I just need you to breathe out. Breathe in, take deep breaths, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. You can do this 5 times. Do the exercise that I just showed you, the spinal twist 5 times. You'll notice you're already feeling more energetic, right? So a lot of what we need to do for ourselves is really quite simple. It's not complicated. The key is to practice it. Another one is a rotational neck stretch. Again, something that you can do while you're seated, whether you're in the car, on a flight, sitting at your desk. Again, notice how your breath flows as you breathe in. Rotate your head backwards, and as you breathe out, forward, breathe in, rotate your head backwards, and breathe out, forward. Do that 3 times, and then reverse. So exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale. Right? I've shown you this 3 times. I'm already feeling relaxed. I don't know about you. That just the act of doing these simple stretches, and I can feel the difference. So highly recommend that you think of doing stretches like these, and there are many more available, right? It's just a question of checking them out on the internet. Again, we work with you on showing you many more when we do the resilience modules. Move your body through the day. So choose to move. Take the stairs to the office. Start gardening. Take your own pets for a walk yourself. Walk around in your house more, right? Find ways of moving naturally. It's not about taking the time out to go to the gym, because for most of us, we're not going to expend so many calories when we're at the gym. Let's not pretend, okay? The average amount of calories expended by people in the gym is about 200 calories. If you were just to up your activity levels through the day, you'd burn those many anyway. So the key is really to get into the habit of moving your body. And that's what honoring your body is all about. Exercise is really crucial for your mental well-being. This is incredibly important, right? So we know that exercise is 150% more effective than pharmaceuticals and cognitive therapy for a lot of people experiencing depression and anxiety. Now, I'm not saying that cognitive behavioral therapy and pharmaceuticals do not have their place in mental health. They absolutely do. But for most of us, if we were just to put our moods aside and move our bodies, and in any way that we choose, right? Whether we choose now we're talking about exercise. Now we're just not just talking about moving our bodies through the day, because you need to do more when you're suffering from mental ill health. But we're talking about whether it's walking or running or any other aerobic exercise, swimming, cycling, or yoga, or weight training. They all work. So it's not a question of one being superior to the other when it comes to your mental health. Your mental health needs your body to move. It really does. It's crying for your body to move. That's another way to think about depression and anxiety, right? And once we actually do the exercise, we find that we're feeling better, right? Our mood shifts when we take action, particularly when we use our bodies to expend energy. There is a shift in our mood. Research has shown this time and time and time again. Like I said, any kind of exercise works. And exercise is also great for the brain. It also makes the brain more resilient. So not only does it decrease feelings of anxiety, which we just talked about, it also improves your focus and concentration. It promotes the growth of new brain cells and therefore protects us from neurodegenerative diseases. This is no small laughing matter. As we age, we're going to see many, many more people with dementia and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's than this country has ever seen before, because that's where we're headed. And we need to think of ways of protecting our brains and making them more resilient. And that's what it means to honor your mind and body. So please get into the habit of exercising, right? It's going to help you not only today, but also it is a insurance for future illness. Now, what is one well-being habit that all mammals practice through their lifetimes and very regularly, except human beings? What is the one well-being habit that human beings tend to think that they can, get away with not engaging in, particularly when they're younger, not think that it's important, think that cutting back on it won't impact their lives, won't impact their health, whether it's mental or physical? What is that one well-being habit? Sleep, yes. Maya, you got it, right? Sleep is that one well-being habit that we think we can sort of skimp on. And the fact of the matter is that sleep hygiene is really, really important, right? So creating a restful environment when you go to bed. And I notice that we're running out of time, so I'm not going to rush through these, but I suspect you know all of this already, right? We now read enough about well-being to know this. It's just that sometimes we need to be reminded. Last, but certainly not the least, is your relationship with food, right? It needs to be a healthy one. What is a healthy relationship with food? It's one where you, even when you're surrounded by a buffet of delicious offerings, your thoughts are not governed by the food. The food doesn't own you in other ways, right? You choose what you want. You aren't overthinking it. You aren't stopping yourself. You're just natural around food. So a natural relationship with food means engaging with it without, having an obsession around it. Eating the colors of the rainbow is a powerful way to protect yourself from all kinds of cancers, and it's good for your mental health as well. What is a nutritionally sort of balanced plate? One that has, 2/3 of it being, fresh fruits and vegetables. The vegetables should be cooked. Ayurveda doesn't recommend eating raw food very, very often. So, please do cook your vegetables, don't overcook them. Get some healthy protein and some whole grains as well. So 1/4 of the plate with whole grains, 1/4 healthy protein, 2/3 with vegetables and some fruit, right? So thinking about nutrition in a manner that is compatible with the lifestyle that you lead and the country that you're in, right? We don't have to go running after the superfoods that America declares as superfoods. We have them at home. We have moringa, it's, the drumstick leaves. We have papayas, and we have jackfruit. We have all the fruits and vegetables right here. Please eat seasonally, please eat locally, please eat as much as you can that's pesticide free, that's organic, as much as you can. We can't become, we can't be rigid about these things because life doesn't allow for that. But as far as possible, choose food that is as clean as it possibly can be. If you can, grow your own, right? Nothing like that. Processed food should just be eliminated from your diet. There's absolutely nothing going for it. And there's a really simple rule that you can follow. Foods that go bad are good for you. Foods that don't go bad, right, are bad for you. And what do you mean when they're bad? Not only are they chemical rich, not only is there no prana in those foods from an Ayurvedic perspective, these foods are designed not to satiate you. You're supposed to finish the entire bag of potato chips. That's the way that they're designed. They have nutritional psychologists hired to make sure that you don't stop after eating one potato chip. The same thing about a bag of cookies. And so you're not satiated, you're filling your body with high fat, high sugar foods that are not good for your heart, that are not good for your blood sugar levels, that are not good for your body inherently, or your mind for that matter. And they taste great because that's how they're designed. So, and they don't satiate you. So it's lose, lose, lose all the way through. Highly avoidable. Do drink lots of water. What is a lot of water? We say 8 glasses a day, but see how your body does, right? And how do you know your body is doing fine? By the color of your urine. So if it's just lightly yellow, you're doing fine. If it's darker than that, then you need to hydrate yourself. It's a simple rule. I've told my children this since they were little. It might seem a bit, a bit sort of out there to be talking about, but it's an important one. It's a simple one to remember. Rest is essential, right? So afternoon naps are great if you can take them, but rest doesn't have to be just as these pictures describe. We talked about this. The brain rests when you exercise. The brain rests when you meditate. The brain rests when it is when it's doing something different, right? When you're working with your hands, when you're being creative, when you're gardening. So any kind of activity that takes you away from your regular work is rest for the brain. And it's really important to take that time out for yourself, right? So when I talk about gardening, when I talk about any creative pursuit like music or dance or painting or cooking for fun, right? Research shows us that it really helps us with managing stress. It helps us with our emotional intelligence. It helps us with problem solve at work better. So we were not meant to lead one-dimensional lives. Human beings were created to do a lot of things, right? But they were meant to do them sequentially. So multitasking is out. It's really, that's something that fatigues the brain. I haven't brought it up in this slide because it comes up. It can come up later but since we are short of time, I can't really get into that. Please do not ever multitask. Your brain is meant for sequential work. Sometimes multitasking is unavoidable in the modern world that we live in, but minimize it, right? So when you're trying to do your focused work, keep the phone away, keep distractions at bay, and then get back to all of the stuff that needs your attention, and then focus on that. Because every time we are taken away from our principal task, our efficiency goes down by 20%. Research shows us this. But if we take time out for ourselves, that can be really supportive as well. So a skill when it comes to breathing that is really, really powerful for those of us who are prone to anxiety, looking at the time, is called box breathing. I'm going to walk you through it really, really quickly because it's a very simple technique, but it's a very powerful technique and for both the mind and the body. So when we're feeling stressed, maybe before an important meeting or just at the end of a really long and hard day, if we know pranayam, that's great. Anulom Vilom is fantastic. But another one is box breathing. What is box breathing? Essentially means that you are holding your hand to your chest and one to your stomach. The reason you're holding it to your stomach is to make sure that you're diaphragmatically breathing. I'm going to assume here, for the sake of our talk today, that you know how to diaphragmatically breathe. And essentially it means that your stomach moves out when you inhale and moves in when you exhale, right? So, and as you diaphragmatically breathe, box breathing essentially means holding your breath for 4, inhaling for 4, holding again your breath for 4 and exhaling for 4. And by 4, we're talking about counts. So I'll just quickly demonstrate it to you. So what you're doing is you're inhaling for 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you hold your breath for 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you exhale for 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You hold your breath for 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You inhale for 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you hold your breath for 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you do this round 5 to 10 times. And you'll notice an immediate shift in the way you're feeling and thinking, because what you end up doing is balancing your parasympathetic and your sympathetic nervous system. So what are the salient points here? Please move your body through the day, spend time outdoors, exercise, run, learn a sport. Please sleep enough. Yes, at least 7 hours. And no devices for an hour before bedtime really works for me. I keep a book by my bedside. I take a bath at night. All of these things help me relax and get to bed on time. Please eat nourishing foods, locally, seasonally, eat like your grandparents did. Avoid foods that are ingredients that you don't recognize, because if you can't recognize the ingredients, if you cannot recognize those chemical names, your body won't either. And finally, when you're stressed, please try Anulom Vilom. Please try the box breathing technique or any other breathing technique that you've learned. Often we know a lot, right? We've learned a lot of techniques, but somehow we forget to practice them at the times that they can be really useful to us. So yoga isn't just about doing it in class. Yoga is about bringing it into our lives, using those stretches through the day in our life, using those breathing techniques through the day in our life, so that our life is more manageable and we become more resilient as a consequence. This is a 5-minute meditation with Dr. Sood, but I think we're out of time, so I'm happy to share the link with all of you. And I'll just go ahead and stop share right now. There you go. I hope you enjoyed the session. I hope you found it informative. Please feel free to share any questions that you might have.
In the chat function, we had a question by Saraswati ji. She says, what is resilience?
Oh, yes. Resilience is your ability to bounce back when life, as it always does, throws challenges, right? And by bouncing back, we're not talking about bouncing back in a manner that leaves us bitter, that leaves us cynical, but being able to carry that positivity through our lives so that we continue to lead a life that is productive and fulfilling and happy.
It's a lovely session, a lot of food for thought, some self-tasking to do before we start leading a life of space of awareness. Very nice techniques you have shared, Dr. Sujata. Thank you. This was great.
Thank you, Praveen.
If the participants have any further questions, I would request them to please unmute and ask Dr. Sujata.
Sujata, I just wanted to mention that, we talk about consciousness and our essential nature being love, right? And fear is completely the opposite of that, right? So the fear comes from the physical manifestation, right? And actually I think the more spiritually inclined we are, and I don't mean religious, inclinations, but when you're spiritually inclined, you get a resilience that is very, very it's very powerful, right? Would you comment on that?
Sure, Binaji. I've sort of kept away from talking about faith and spirituality, but it is indeed the most powerful tool of resilience. There's no question. There is absolutely no question. And I think gratitude is a small step towards that. And the resilience module talks about, the other resilience modules talk about compassion and self-compassion and kindness. So we're agreeing with you, but we're agreeing with you gradually, because we're all at different places in our spiritual journey, and for many of us, it might be too much to take in right away. But these are practices that are very simple to follow and very easy to do without really talking about the spiritual impact. But I can't imagine somebody who isn't steeped in gratitude not also being spiritual, or steeped in compassion not also being spiritual. So I completely agree with you. I think that is indeed the bedrock of resilience. And in fact, one of the slides that I have in our resilience module number 3 is we ask, who is stronger mentally, and there's a picture of Mother Teresa, and there's a woman who's like, looks like a bodybuilder, right? So who is more resilient? And to sort of bring that awareness into people, and perhaps this stage, this audience is far more sort of, we could have had a different discussion, a discussion that was more spiritually inclined. But for most of my audience, it's usually people who are, busy in their grihasti phrase, and not quite thinking about their spiritual life. So
no, this is a great starting point, and I think we have to recognize what we can do to build resilience purely out of gratitude, sleep, and whatever else you mentioned, eating well and keeping our body healthy. Absolutely, there's no question about that. Also, resilience is related to what age you are at. So you will use different tools for resilience as you age.
100%.
Thank you. Very informative. Thank you.
Any further questions?
I think this was a great session and very thought-provoking and covered many grounds. Perhaps this could be a forerunner if we could all think, like many of us are here from Bangalore only, to have a live workshop conducted by Dr. Sujata Shetty, which could have some props, and so we could benefit more. Just a thought I'm sharing. Is it doable?
I'd be very happy to do it, Praveen. If there is adequate interest, we can definitely do a live session, a live workshop.
Okay, we'll run it parallelly with some groups, and then we'll get back. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Most welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Sujata. Big thank you to all our participants for your valuable presence this evening. At Rtambhara, we look forward to your presence on select Fridays, where we bring to you interesting topics on holistic wellness and the arts, delivered by a host of distinguished, knowledgeable speakers. The upcoming program details will be posted on our WhatsApp and social media platform. Thank you, everyone. Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you.